What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Knives of the Round Table. My name is Marco, and today we're going to be talking about the NV2 by Tuya Knives. Now, the NV2 is a knife that it would have never come across my radar. It's kind of an obscure brand. They don't, you don't hear about them too much, except, with the knife community, with everybody creating content. There's very, very few knives that slip through the cracks, and this one is one that I saw on Nick Shabazz's channel, and it kind of caught my eye because it has a compound grind, and I love me a compound grind, and I just couldn't resist. Now, in fairness, this one is really good value. It's not a very expensive knife, and that's why I was able to just pull the trigger on this one. It's a titanium frame lock. You've got titanium scales that have this really nice milling pattern here. They're contoured. You've got some milling pattern in the back. You've got a milled pocket clip. This is an M390 blade. The DW2, that's the designer, Dave Warren, I believe he's his name. So all in all, the specs are kind of a standard spec, right? Titanium frame lock flipper with an M390 blade. There's about 6 billion knives like this, but the lines in this one are actually pretty compelling. I think it's a very nicely designed knife. We're gonna go through all of the things that I've enjoyed and some of the things that I don't like about it. But let me give you an idea of the size, because this is not a large knife. It actually carries very well. So I think the best comparison is probably the Benchmade bug out that you see there. This is the mini bug out. But in terms of how it carries, it is bigger than the bug out, okay? Probably the blade length is comparable. The handle's a little bit longer. But as far as how it carries in the pocket, that's probably the closest one I have for you. When you close them, they carry fairly compact. Okay, so if you enjoy how the bug out carries, the NV2 is gonna carry similarly. If we now compare it to the Para 2 and the Para 3, it's kind of in the middle of those two. It's certainly gonna carry better than these two, just because the Paras are much taller when they're closed, but it's a little bit smaller than the Para 3, a little bit smaller than the Para 2 and larger than Para 3. So ergonomics on this knife are actually pretty darn good. You've got this finger groove here, and then a palm swell, and then so when I like the ergonomics on a knife, it's generally when the knife tells you how it wants to be held. It guides your hand exactly where it wants to be, and everything just lands in its place. The thumb ramp, your thumb lands directly on it. The forward, this finger groove, all of that, it's really good. Now in my hands, I don't say excellent, because it's a smaller knife. So what happens with knives that have a smaller dimension in this way is that if you have larger hands, and I wear size large gloves, if you have larger hands, your fingers kind of hit the back of your hand, the palm of your hand, because it's a smaller knife. Now, all of that said, it fits your hand well, right? It feels well in the hand. There's no hot spots that I can tell. But I think if I had medium hands, I would call this a excellent ergonomics. It has this choil up here. It's kind of wants to be a finger choil, but doesn't quite get there. So I wouldn't use it as a finger choil. It's too small. But as a sharpening choil is huge. So it's kind of a weird thing. But ergonomically, I would say that it's definitely in the pro column as opposed to being in the con column. Now, action is actually it's actually pretty decent. The point is really good, and closing, it kind of wants to drop shot. It's on phosphor bronze washers. Okay, it's not on bearings. I don't know if you can tell, but it's not on bearings. So this action will get smoother and smoother over time, but it's already fairly good. I mean, I can get it to drop shot with a little bit of coaxing, not much, and deploying it feels really good. So I would say that for a titanium frame lock flipper on phosphor bronze washers, I would say that the action's pretty good. My son, he considers this one of the best actions out of all my knives. If you wanna if you want another point of view, he enjoys this action better than most. So I think the action's pretty good, and I think it'll get better as the phosphor bronze washers, polish up and the knife breaks in. Cutting, I would say that that cutting is decent. It's not the thinnest blade stock in the world, but it does, with a hollow grind that reaches pretty high up in the blade. It cuts fairly well. You're gonna do a lot better on shallow cuts. Something that keeps your cut in the hollow portion of the blade. Rope cutting, that kind of thing. It's gonna do really well on push through cuts, cardboard, apples, that kind of stuff. It's not gonna do as well. Look, for the amount of cutting that I do in my daily life, most all knives work. I have met first that work, with huge thick blades. I have, I like chunkier, stouter knives, and they all cut very well for what I need. But I can tell you that it's not as slicey as you would get from a pair two. Okay, it's definitely not in that category. It'll do what you need it to, and especially on shallow cuts. But it's not the greatest slicer in the world. Now, fit and finish on the knife is actually, I would call it very good for the money. It's not excellent. It's not perfect. So this is let me say this is made in China. So for those of you who prefer to not get a Chinese made knife, this is not going to be for you. But I would say that this is actually fairly decent value. This is right around $200, and I think the NV3 is already out, so I think you can still get this one. But I think you can more readily find the NV3. But I would say that it's actually fairly decent value, because you have it's titanium scales that are really nicely milled. It's contoured. You have a lock bar insert. You have this really nice pivot that I like. You got this milled pocket clip that kind of matches the milling on the scales. You have this compound grind blade of M390 steel with this thumb ramp. The jimping is actually fairly well done, and all of that for about $200. I would say that that's really good value. You have something like that, like the Parrot 2 in 20 CV, which is kind of the same steel, and this is about $190. But this is a G10 scale in a liner lock. I would say that value wise, that Tuya is probably a better value, especially because I think it's a really attractive design. So dislikes. What don't I like? The airing of grievances. Well, I think I've been spoiled. So the compound ground on this is not Riyadh. Okay, Riyadh does a tremendous job on transitioning from the flat up here to the hollow, to the point, and the swedge. Those transitions on the Riyadh made knives are just excellent. They're nice, crisp, very well delineated. Here, I'm not sure what they did, because you kind of get a hint of grind lines in the hollow, but not quite there. and then the transition's been rounded off here, all through here, and then the transition between the point and the hollow here, this transition's been rounded off. And then I don't know if you can tell, right around here, it looks like, I don't know, like a flat area that's not really well done. So I'm not sure what they did. I don't know if they, they buffed it, or, I don't know what they did after they ground it, but it certainly made it a lot softer. So, I like the Riot quality control as far as that goes. Everything feels nice and rounded, but it doesn't feel, intentionally rounded. It feels like, we just, put it in the buffer and everything kind of got rounded. So I don't like when they do that. You can't complain too much because of the price point that you're working at, but it is something that I would say is not on par with some of the high quality production knives out of China. This is definitely not in that category. It's on phosphor bronze washers. It's not on bearings, and you don't get those nice transitions. But again, it costs about half as much. So there's only so much you can complain when you get a tremendous value like this one. So I would highly recommend this knife. I do. I think there's a lot of positives here, especially if you enjoy carrying the Benchmade bug out. I think it's not as slicey as the Benchmade, but I think it kind of fills that same category. So if you want something that's a little stouter than the Benchmade, and that has probably a little bit more forward design, I would say that the Tuya NV2 is a good knife. One thing that I really like that they did, and I forgot to mention, is that their logo is this triangular thing right here, and then they've milled the titanium such that the triangular piece kind of matches that angle. It doesn't quite match exactly, but close enough, and I like that they did that, kind of like with the Dave Warren 2 over here. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, like, subscribe. Don't get notifications. Nobody likes to get emails notifying you to go do stuff. Don't hit the notifications, but do subscribe so that when you decide that you want to see stuff, you get in your reel. Guys, take care. I'll see you at the next one.